Books make you hope. Books make you dream. Books make you laugh. Books make you scream. This is the Books That Make You show, discussing books with authors and experts, unraveling the inner pages of all the books that help make us who we are. Hosted by Desiree Duffy.
Welcome, everybody. It is time for the Books That Make You show. I'm your host, Desiree Duffy, and today we are talking about books that help you to eat better. Yeah. Do you use food to cope sometimes? Does it help you get through a particularly stressful day? Would you like to learn more about emotional eating and how you can overcome it? Well, then you're in luck, because our guest today is Dr. Sheila Forman, Ph.D., a clinical psychologist and eating disorder specialist. She's created a thorough and easy to follow 15-week program that helps people let go of emotional eating. Week by week, Dr. Forman takes the readers through the steps that are necessary to understand the relationship between emotions and food. And by the end of those 15 weeks, people find that they have a plan for dealing with their emotional life without turning to food as a coping mechanism. Now, she's written several books. Her upcoming book, her forthcoming book, which is going to come out in the spring of 2022, is Tame Your Appetite. She has a couple of other books under her belt as well. Dr. Sheila Forman, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you so much. I appreciate being here.
I am excited to have you because eating and emotional eating, and especially nowadays, it just seems like there's so many things going on in the world that makes us emotional and a little stressed out. Mm-hmm. So, okay, why don't you, so your forthcoming book, the one that's coming out this spring, is Correct. Tame Your Appetite, and that's going to have the 15-week program. Now, you have two other books. Do you have those on hand that you might want to hold them up really quick?
Yes, as a matter of fact, the 15-week program is the book that's out already called Do You Use Food to Cope? This was my doctoral dissertation when I was becoming a clinical psychologist. It's 15 weeks to overcome emotional overeating. The Tame Your Appetite is 5 steps, and it focuses on mindful eating. So it teaches you how to be mindful, including how to be mindful about your emotions. So mindful eating is the next step in my journey of teaching people how to be at peace with food and how to lose weight without dieting. So it started with this book, Do You Use Food to Cope? And then if you don't mind, the second book was called The Best Diet Begins in Your Mind. This looks at the 8 emotions that people eat over most frequently and what to do instead. And then the Tame Your Appetite book, which is coming out in April, is a culmination of everything I've ever learned about emotional overeating and mindful eating. And it's 5 steps. Very, very simple program that will help people change their relationship with food completely.
Got it. Okay, there's a lot to unpack there. So, yeah. Well, let's start, because all your books have a similar theme, obviously, yes. And you're helping people in many ways. Let's start with the core question of what exactly is emotional eating? How do we recognize that?
Emotional eating is, by my definition, whenever we eat when we're not physically hungry. So that could be because we're celebrating and we're eating. That's okay. We're eating for joy. It could also be we've had a hard day. We come home at the end of the day and we're angry and we go into the refrigerator and we grab the first thing that's there. That's emotional eating. So part of the way to learn about emotional eating is to learn about your physical hunger. Eat when you're physically hungry, and when you're not physically hungry, learn to address the emotions directly instead of leaning into food as a coping mechanism.
Yeah. And let's talk about how these habits start, because I always think about, it's so easy. I'm a grandparent and a parent as well. And we've all done it, right? Where it's like, okay, finish your broccoli, then you get the treat. So does a lot of, the emotional eating issues that people have, does it start early on, and how can we address that?
It absolutely starts early on. And please don't judge yourself or feel critical if you're offering your little sweetie a cookie after the broccoli. That's what we do. But it is teaching children to be separate from their physical needs, from the need for the broccoli, or sometimes they actually need a cookie. In the Do You Use Food to Cope book, I talk about that. I have people go back in their history to see where might this have all started. And again, it's well-meaning parents, well-meaning grandparents who use food to calm the child down, to reward the child. I get that. But when we step into adulthood and we start to become responsible for our own actions, that's the time to stop getting the lollipop every time you go to the doctor's office. That's the time to start to learn to treat your emotions for what they are, an expression of how you're feeling, and deal with them more directly.
Excellent. So let's talk about the 15 weeks. That sounds like a really long time to me, but can you break that down a little bit and tell people what they can expect from?
Of course. So the 15 weeks, it's a very slow, gradual process of teaching you that diets really don't work. And it starts with you taking an examination of your own history with diets. So many of us, myself included, lived on the diet merry-go-round. You'd be on a diet for a while, you lose the weight, and then life steps in and we get sidetracked. That happens. So what the 15-step program is, by week, it just teaches you a little bit more about your relationship with food, how to let go of the dieting mentality. We're calling it now the diet culture, to learn to trust your body, and then how to deal with life on life's terms. And the book contains a lot of emotional eating support. In fact, when I wrote Best Diet, the next book, I pulled from the first book, so to make a book just about those emotions. But the other one contains like a chart. So if you're feeling anxious, you go to the chart. What do you do instead? So it does feel like a lot, but Desiree, when we're unlearning a lifetime of habits, 15 weeks isn't that long. But in the beginning, it can feel, oh my God, she wants me to do this for 15 weeks. Is she crazy? No, I am mindful.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and I think too, it's reassuring to know that people can ease into it sometimes, and we'll treat the word diet like it should be. It's a bit of a word that just gives us shivers, right? We think of depriving ourselves and we're going to have to suffer. Diets don't sound fun, but what you're talking about is really relearning habits and kind of easing ourselves into it so that it feels comfortable and it feels natural.
Right. And when you do it slowly and organically, the changes last. Anyone can give up sugar for 30 days, let's say. But on that 31st day, there isn't a Halloween treat that's safe in the entire city if you've been denying yourself sugar for 30 days. So easing yourself into making a shift, for example, with how much sugar you eat based on what your body can tolerate, is a long-standing habit that can carry you for many, many years, if not decades. And that's part of what I try to teach people, because we are the product of our habits. So, for example, the body I have right now is a product of my emotional habits, my physical habits, my spiritual habits. And so if I want to change that, I have to change all of those areas. I have to learn to eat differently, sleep differently, exercise differently, just so that I now have a body that supports that new lifestyle. And so people think if I just change one habit and do it for a little while, everything will be better. Unfortunately, it doesn't work that way. It's really the constellation of all your habits. So little by little, you can make very soft changes that suit you, that can shift your body into a weight that's healthy. And that may or may not be the weight you're at right now. It's different for everybody.
Yeah. And can we talk a little bit about metabolism and then how physically our body does react? Because if we do go on a crash diet, and that's what they called them back in our days, crash diet or fasting, intermittent fasting,
that's
that can be used
now.
And it can be very effective too. But there's a certain, schedule that you need to maintain when you're doing that. So can you talk about what happens when the body feels like it's deprived and our metabolism and what can go on there?
That is one of the primary scientific reasons that we know why diets don't work, because the body is very intricate and the body has all sorts of systems that work in congruent with each other to keep us alive. When the body starts to feel like it's not getting the nutrition that it needs, it starts to shut down because it wants us to keep going. And so even though we're living in a modern society where we have food available to us 24/7, our bodies don't know that. So the metabolism starts to shut down so it can use the little bit it thinks it's getting to keep us alive. The problem is once we go back to eating our more regular food, our metabolism is slower and we regain the weight. And to reestablish the metabolism is not an easy feat. It doesn't just go back the minute you start eating more food again. So that's one of the reasons why dieting, and especially very strict dieting where you're really cutting calories, is counterproductive. You might get some weight off initially, but the long-term consequences are that the weight will come back, and usually with more.
Can we talk a little bit? You've mentioned body image and our
Mhm.
appearance and our physical
Yep.
appearance, because that's what it boils down to, is we want to
Mhm.
look good because we see on TV the models and the actors.
Mhm.
They're beautiful people and we want to be
Yeah.
like them, don't we?
Mhm. Yeah, many of us do. And I'm sure when I was younger, I strived for it more. There's a lot of advantages to being middle-aged. That for me, anyway, there was a sort of a self-acceptance and self-confidence that came along with life experience. But I remember a quote from Cindy Crawford. You may be familiar with it. She once said that even she doesn't wake up looking like Cindy Crawford. So when we look at the magazines, we have to remember that these are photoshopped. These are people who spend their entire lives working on their bodies. I don't know about you, Desiree, but I have a full-time career. I have a family life, a social life. I'm busy. I try to get my exercise in each day, but it's not my job. The models that we see, that's their job. So a lot of the work that I do is helping people accept who they are. I come from sturdy German and Polish stock. I come from, so I will never be that waif. But you know what? I'm proud of my heritage. I'm proud of the strong women who came before me. So if I'm a little bit thicker than the ideal on television, you know what? That's okay. Because I have a lot of other things that are going for me. And I've learned to accept who I am in my body. And that's a lot of what I help my clients do. Because you might want to look like Cindy Crawford, but unless you were born with exactly her gene pool, it's unlikely you're going to turn into her. So body acceptance, personal acceptance is a key component of the work that I do.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. That's really great advice. So when you are working with your clients and they do feel that their body isn't the ideal standard, do you find too that sometimes what they think they look like isn't what they really look like? We have this, yeah.
Yeah. So there's actually a diagnosis called body dysmorphic disorder, which is the extreme of what you're describing. But even not in a diagnosable form, I see it a lot and it breaks my heart. Women who come to me and say, oh, I'm so fat, I can't go to my cousin's wedding. And they're lovely. Okay, are they skinny minis? No, but could they look spectacular in a beautiful dress and have their hair done? And of course, but they don't know that. And that's because they've internalized this idea that who I am is not okay. And a lot of my work clinically is to say, yeah, who you are is very much okay. And let's run with her.
Mm-hmm. I love that. Talk a little bit about mindful eating. What do you mean by mindfulness when we're eating?
Sure. So in all my work with emotional overeating, some of my clients absolutely got it, and some of them were still struggling. And so I eventually learned about mindful eating. Mindful eating is about focusing yourself on the process of eating, being more aware of what your body needs, being more aware of what the food tastes like, being more aware of whether you like food, the food that you're eating or not, whether you need it or not. And so I've added that component into my work with emotional eating to help people recognize, am I really hungry? And if I am, what am I hungry for? Sometimes you're hungry for a boiled egg. Other times you're hungry for a double chocolate chip muffin. They're both okay. It's when you eat with awareness and you're paying attention to your body and you're letting your body dictate what you eat, not some diet, not some magazine article, then you're being mindful. And when you add the mindfulness into the other work, it's a winning formula.
Is there anything to different body types, different people? You mentioned your ethnicity. I'm German too, by the way. I totally understand. I've even had doctors say to me, well, those hips, that's German. And I'm like, what?
Yeah.
Got German hips? But, I do wonder, it took me many, many years to discover I just can't eat bread. I am not, it's not gluten. It's not, they've done tests and everything. Gluten is fine. But for whatever reason, just keep me away from bread. Yeah. Is there any science behind different body types, different physicalities, and how they react to different foods?
That's such a great question. And I'm not aware of those kind of specifics. I know years ago there was the blood type diet that was out there. That's, from my understanding, has since been debunked. But what you're talking about is actually being mindful that that when you eat bread, your body does not respond well for whatever reason, whether it's your German heritage or not, I don't know. But the fact that you know that and then are making the mindful choice, I'm not going to have bread anymore because for me, bread doesn't work. And that to me is being mindful. I tried to go vegan myself. I love animals. The idea of eating animals was for a while there. I didn't want to do it. But I noticed that when I ate vegan and I eliminated animal products from my body, I didn't feel well. And even though I really wanted to be vegan, I couldn't because my body didn't sit well with that. All, the foods that one would eat with a vegan diet didn't match me. And because I'm being mindful, I'm like, okay, you know what? Tofu is not going to work for me. Tofu is not the right food for my body. So the more you pay attention, the more you can design a diet, if we want to use that word, that's specific to you. I can eat bread and my body doesn't have any reaction. I don't bloat. I don't gain weight. You have a different reaction, but you might do really well with tofu. Maybe your body can process tofu really well and mine can't. The estrogen that tofu stimulates was not good for me. So we're all unique, and mindfulness helps us tune in and say, yeah, for me, this is good. For me, this is not good. And then you make the choice. You might still choose to have bread sometimes, Desiree, and know that that day you're not going to feel so well. Okay. It's a mindful choice. The next day you skip the bread.
Exactly. And I totally understand. There are hormonal components to food as well.
Yes.
Edamame, tofu. I'm the same way. I love it. I love going out for sushi and having my edamame, but I know that it's going to just make me feel awful. And there's that hormonal component to it.
Yes. And that's what makes emotional eating so interesting. It works. Food works. When you're having a bad day and you grab into a bite of chocolate, there are chemicals in the chocolate that change your physiology that actually make you feel better. It taps into our dopamine receptors. It taps into our serotonin receptors, all which makes us feel good, which is why we continue to emotionally eat. So every time we ingest something, there are a cascade of biological consequences, hormonal and neurotransmitters. So with the edamame, we know that it's a estrogen trigger. And so it can produce more estrogen or the effects of estrogen in one's body. And that might be why it doesn't work for you. It doesn't work for me, but works for other people. But that's part of why food is hard to give up, because it works. You have a bad day, you eat a container of ice cream, you do feel better momentarily. You don't feel much better later after the consequences of eating the whole pint of ice cream. But in the moment, it works.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, you've mentioned a little bit about yourself and your journey, trying to go vegan and everything. What kind of struggles have you gone through that got you to this place?
So I don't know if you know this about me, Desiree, but I started my professional life as a lawyer. And I got through law school eating peanut M&Ms. And when I graduated from law school, I honestly wanted to write a letter to the M&Ms company saying, thank you for creating peanut M&Ms, or I wouldn't have survived. I didn't know then that I was eating for emotional reasons. I didn't know then that I was using the M&Ms to help me cope. I didn't learn that until I went to graduate school and started studying eating disorders. I've never had a full-blown diagnosable eating disorder like anorexia or bulimia, but I do know what it means to eat to cope. And I am guilty during the pandemic of, eating to cope. So even though I'm mindful, some days I'm more mindful, other days I'm mindfully, emotionally eating. I'm saying to myself, I'm having a bad day. I'm going to have ice cream today, but I do it mindfully. I don't know if you know this, but in the United States, the American Psychological Association said that the Americans gained an average of 29 pounds during the COVID pandemic. So we were all joking about the quarantine 15. The most recent study that I've seen from the APA is that it's 29.
29 pounds.
Yeah.
Oh,
so we were all emotionally overeating during the pandemic because we were looking for a way to feel better. So I wish I could tell you that I am perfect and that I've got this all mastered. But what I can tell you is I'm a human being and I struggle the same way. When there's a loss, I struggle. When there's joy, I want to celebrate. But I do so now mindfully, so that food is not the only thing I reach for when I'm having a bad day or when I want to celebrate.
And I think that's important because you're very approachable, authentic. You're a real person. You use Cindy Crawford as the example, and I'm sure Cindy Crawford is lovely as well. But again, when we're hearing the message from people that we can absolutely relate to, it just resonates so much more. Thank you. That's a lovely compliment. I really appreciate it. Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean it. And you're touching on something too. We're locked down, or we've been locked down. Some of us are still locked down. Yes. We're just not moving as much as we used to. How much does exercise play into everything? Yes. So an important element of exercise is that it's not really a weight loss tool.
Again, if you look at the science behind it, exercise really doesn't lead to or sustain much weight loss. But as a stress management tool, as a way to cope with how we're feeling, there's nothing better. So during the early days of the pandemic, I cut out my walking outside because for me to walk with a mask on was very uncomfortable. I just couldn't breathe. So I moved to the treadmill, which I didn't like so much. So I have to admit that my exercise fell off. But then I also noticed that I was emotionally eating more because I didn't have that natural release that I always had, that hour morning walk. Now I'm back to walking again and I can feel the difference. Mm-hmm. So I try to counsel my clients that exercise should be something that supports your whole life. You're not doing it because you're trying to undo something that you ate. If you ate a cookie and then you want to do 200 calories, burn it off on the treadmill, that's the wrong approach. Be on the treadmill because it makes you feel good, that a good sweat releases the toxins and emotionally from your body. So that's, for me, the role of exercise. And in my Tame Your Appetite programs and in the upcoming book, we talk about mindful exercise, about using exercise for that purpose, for how it makes you feel, not because you're driving to get that scale down by another pound.
Yeah. And let's talk a little bit more specifically about your forthcoming book, about Tame Your Appetite. So there's 5 things in the book that you want to touch on. Do you want to highlight those?
Of course. So it's a 5-step program. It's based on my training on mindfulness-based eating awareness. I am a qualified MB-EAT instructor. MB-EAT stands for mindfulness-based eating awareness. And the 5 steps include, first of all, believe it or not, beginning a meditation practice. The foundation of mindful eating, as I teach it, is built on a foundation of meditation. And the reason for that is twofold. First, meditation calms us down. Just a general, natural release of stress and anxiety when we get into a daily meditation practice. That by itself eliminates a lot of emotional eating. Because when you're walking through life feeling calmer, there's less likelihood that you're going to reach for food as a coping mechanism. The second reason we start with meditation is that in mindfulness meditation in particular, you don't try to quiet your mind. You don't try to, go silent. That's impossible. But it's learning how to be present with your thoughts and not react to them. That's also crucial in changing your eating habits, because sometimes you see that cookie and you reach for it without even realizing it. It's so automatic. But when you start to train your mind with a mindfulness meditation basis, there's a pause. Do I really want that cookie? Yes, grab it and enjoy it. Or no, you know what? It's pretty, but I don't need it. So we start with meditation. Then we move into inner wisdom, which is learning about your body. How do you know you're hungry? How do you know you're thirsty? Then we move into something I called outer guidance, which is using appropriate nutritional information from reputable science to teach you. I'll give you an example in my own life. My mother had macular degeneration. She had a very, very severe case. By the time she passed away, she was almost completely blind. I have the genetic predisposition for that. So I've been educating myself, and I've learned that leafy green vegetables is really good for someone who might develop macular degeneration. I keep that in mind. So now when I'm making a choice about a salad, I might choose the one with the spinach in it because it has leafy greens. Then we move into mindful emotional coping. How do you deal with your emotions without eating through a mindful perspective, including exercise? And the last step is incorporating mindfulness into your whole life. Just learning to be more present, more aware with your relationships, with your work. And there's this at the end of all of that. It's like life becomes just simpler and more joyful when you incorporate mindfulness. So it's a very simple, basic program. I take you step by step. I hold your hand. And in the end, your relationship with food and with yourself can shift. And that's what's exciting for me about it.
That is exciting. And it's so true. Everything is interconnected. And when we start looking at aspects of our life compartmentalized like that, that's a lot of times where things just aren't jiving and working together, because it is our spiritual selves, our mental selves, our physical selves, everything works together, doesn't it?
It sure does. And once you figure that out, you see the connections, and that's part of mindfulness, is noticing those connections. Life also starts to make more sense. And in a chaotic world like we're having right now, mindfulness has been an extraordinary tool for me and for others to just sort of get centered and be at peace with what's happening around us.
Oh, absolutely. I love that. Okay, Dr. Sheila, I'm going to ask you a little bit about the writing process because you've got 3 books under yourself, which is quite an accomplishment. Congratulations. How did you feel after writing them? And how do you feel now, especially now that Tame Your Appetite is about ready to be released?
Oh, thank you for asking me that. I love to write. Writing is my hobby. And I discovered that I love it actually when I was writing my doctoral dissertation, of all things. I created a poster board that I taped to the side of my refrigerator, and I put little boxes in it. It looked like a big piece of graph paper. And every day I put an assignment in, what I'm going to do each day. And that got me into the habit of doing something every day. When the dissertation was finished and I submitted it, I felt lost. I felt I need to keep writing. So I actually wrote another book that I haven't mentioned yet because it's not specifically on eating. It's called Self-Fullness, The Art of Loving and Caring for Yourself. That was the first book that I actually published way back in 2000. But for me, I love writing because for me, writing is teaching, and I'm a natural teacher. So my style of writing is to write a little bit every day. So when I was writing Self-Fullness or Tame Your Appetite, that was my goal. Every day I would write anywhere from 15 minutes to a half an hour, but it was every day. And then my secret, and I learned this from Ernest Hemingway, I think it's the legend is, he once said, never leave a writing session with a period. Always leave a writing session in the middle of a sentence. I don't know if he actually said that, but it was attributed to him the way I heard it. That has saved me because when I stop in the middle of a sentence, I pick up from the sentence and I can get going. If I come to a period, now all of a sudden it's like, where do I go from here? And so that has allowed me to be as prolific, if you will, with my writing because it's been continuous. I've been very lucky. I haven't suffered too much of a writer's block because of that no period little secret that I use. But for me, writing is fun.
Yeah, I've heard that too. That's
It's attributed to Ernest Hemingway, the way you heard it?
I believe so.
Yeah, that's how I heard
it. Yeah.
So that for me is a secret. And then what I do also is I always start with an outline and then I fill the outline in. So I see the frame of the whole book before I even put the first word to page. And then I start to fill it in. And yeah, it's fun. I'll just keep doing for as long as my little fingers can hit the keyboard.
As long as those fingers keep going, you're going to keep going.
I'm going to keep going. Right. Exactly.
Okay. So we know that Tame Your Appetite is coming out in the spring of 2022. Yeah. What else is on the horizon for you? Is there going to be a 4th book? Are you doing any workshops?
Thank you for asking. There's actually 2 more books in the pipeline. The one that will come out much later in 2022 is called Mindful Bites, Joyful Life. It's 365 days of mindful eating. And there I'm really holding the reader's hand because it's every single day. There's a little lesson about mindfulness, a little homework assignment, and a journal question to journal. And then there'll be a journal book that goes with it. And that to me, that's my baby, that one that's going to be coming out later in 2022, because every day you start with January 1st. And every day, just a little bit, it builds a meditation practice over the course of a year. It builds mindful eating over the course of a year. And so I'm very excited. That one will be coming out sometime again in 2022.
That is amazing. And you're right. Journaling, mindfulness, healthy eating, everything that you're talking about is just, it's touching me right here. So Dr. Sheila, you're definitely going to have to come back maybe later next year and talk to us again after that next book comes out. Okay.
Oh, it'd be my pleasure. Anytime, Desiree. It's such a joy to be with you. And I appreciate the interest that you take in my work.
Absolutely. How about if you tell everybody where they can go to find your books, to find you, follow you on social media?
Thank you. So the easiest way to reach me is through my appetite. I think I'm a little bit hungry, Desiree. I think I'm a little bit hungry. Through my website called TameYourAppetite.com. There you'll find everything. You'll find my books. I have audio programs, video programs. My coaching everything is on there. It's the portal for everything. It's the easiest way to reach me. All the links to my social media are on there, as well as my newsletter. So best way to go is to TameYourAppetite.com.
Perfect. Dr. Sheila Forman, psychologist, author, and woman of many, many talents. Thank you for joining us today on the Books That Make You show.
Oh, thank you so much, Desiree. All the best to you.
And thank you, everybody, for being with us today as well. You can find out more about us on our website. It's booksthatmakeyou.com. Yes, Please hold up those books. Beautiful, beautiful. You can find out more about Dr. Sheila there, as well as other interviews with authors and experts. There's something for all book lovers on the Books That Make You website. Follow us as well on social media. We're on Instagram as well as YouTube. Make sure you subscribe, Facebook, and we're also on TikTok too. So follow us there as well. Until next time, all of my book loving friends, please enjoy all of the books that make you exactly who you are.
The executive producer for Books That Make You is Desiree Duffy. Produced and sound mastered by Phil Giangrande. Engineering by Dave Nabox. Social media and promotion by Bree Sweeter. For more, visit booksthatmakeyou.com.